Before we begin, a warning. What you're about to hear isn't for the faint of heart. If you think you can handle the darkest depths of life behind bars, then step inside. Hit subscribe, like this video, and let's discuss the 9 most brutal prisons on Earth. They call it the place where hope dies. Our journey begins in the Colorado Rockies. Buried deep in the desert plains near Florence, Colorado, stands the most secure prison in the United States, ADX Florence, also known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. It's where America locks away the men it fears the most. Inside these walls live terrorists, spies, mob bosses, and mass murderers, criminals whose names changed history. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Ramzi Youssef, who bombed the World Trade Center in 1993. Zacarias Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker of 9/11. Even El Chapo Guzman, the Mexican drug lord who escaped 2 maximum security prisons in Mexico, could not escape this one. There are no metal bars here, only concrete. Each inmate lives alone in a 7 by 12-foot cell built of reinforced stone, with a single narrow window that faces only the sky. For 23 hours a day, they sit in silence. 1 hour for exercise, still alone, in a cage the size of a shower stall. ADX isn't just designed to contain. It's designed to control every sense, every movement, every breath. Prison architects once said, "You don't see another person unless we want you to." Meals arrive through a slot. Conversations are rare. Guards walk soundless corridors lined with cameras and motion detectors. Even the doors open remotely, from a control room down the hall. Inmates describe the silence as a kind of madness. Letters smuggled out by former prisoners speak of hallucinations, self-harm, and men screaming through the night. A former warden, Robert Hood, once told reporters, "This isn't designed for humanity. It's designed for total control. It's not built for rehabilitation. It's built for punishment." Civil rights groups have called ADX a clean version of hell. In 2012, a group of prisoners filed a lawsuit against the Bureau of Prisons, alleging that men with severe mental illness were being locked in solitary confinement for decades. One inmate wrote, "I hear voices telling me to hurt myself. The only thing louder is the silence." After years of public pressure, the Department of Justice finally agreed to reforms, limiting how long mentally ill inmates could be kept in solitary. But the prison remains what it was always meant to be, the final stop for America's most dangerous minds. In Florence, there are no riots, no fights, no escapes. Just the quiet erosion of what makes a person human. From the silence of Colorado, we travel 7,000 miles south to a place where chaos, not control, ruled. Carandiru Penitentiary, Sao Paulo, Brazil. Before it was demolished in 2002, Carandiru was a city of despair. Built in the 1950s to hold about 3,000 inmates, by the 1990s it held over 8,000, stacked in overcrowded cell blocks run by gangs and guarded by fear. Infections like HIV and tuberculosis spread unchecked. Prisoners slept shoulder to shoulder. Doctors described the smell of blood and rot. And then, on October 2nd, 1992, the world saw how fragile order can be. A fight between 2 inmates during a soccer game triggered a riot. Guards fled the cell blocks, locking gates behind them. Military police were called in, and what followed became one of the worst prison massacres in history. Armed officers stormed the prison and opened fire. When the gunfire stopped, 111 prisoners lay dead. Many were unarmed, shot at close range. Autopsies showed that most had been hit in the back or head. The official report called it a necessary use of force. But eyewitnesses, journalists, and survivors told another story of executions, not a riot. One man who lived through it said, "When the bullets stopped, they told us to carry the bodies. We stacked them ourselves." The massacre drew global outrage. Human rights organizations condemned Brazil's prison system for its brutality and inhuman conditions. Dr. Drauzio Varela, who volunteered at Carandiru as a physician, later published his book, Estacao Carandiru, documenting years of disease, violence, and neglect. His words cut deep. Inside Carandiru, life was worth nothing, but silence was priceless. In 2001, Colonel Ubaratan Guimarães, the commander who ordered the raid, was convicted of 111 counts of murder and sentenced to 632 years in prison. But he never served a day. In 2006, A court overturned the conviction, ruling he had acted under orders. Months later, Guimarães was found dead in his apartment, shot once in the chest. His death was officially labeled unsolved. Today, the site where Carandiru once stood is a public park. But for those who remember, the ghosts are not gone, because no monument can wash away the blood that once covered that ground. From Brazil's chaos, we move to Africa's largest city, Lagos, Nigeria. Here stands Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison, one of the most notorious correctional facilities on the continent. Built in 1955 during British colonial rule, Kirikiri was meant to hold 800 inmates. Today, reports estimate over 3,000 men behind its walls. Cells meant for 2 often hold 10 or more. Former detainees describe filthy conditions, poor ventilation, insects, and disease. Some inmates sleep on bare floors, others fight for space. Food is scarce. Water, when available, is often unsafe. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have repeatedly reported overcrowding, corruption, and abuse inside Kirikiri. Some prisoners wait years, even decades, without trial. In 2018, Nigeria's Minister of Interior confirmed that more than 70% of inmates in the country were awaiting trial. When journalists were allowed limited access in 2018, officials showed them newly painted cells, repaired walls, and a functioning kitchen. But behind those upgrades, former inmates described a different world, one where officers used beatings as discipline and bribery determined survival. A former prisoner told The Guardian, "We were packed so tight you couldn't stretch your legs. People died quietly at night. No one counted." Kirikiri's name has become shorthand in Nigeria for the end of the line, the last stop. It's a place where poverty, delay, and neglect merge into a single punishment. 3 prisons, 3 faces of despair. ADX Florence, where silence kills. Carandiru, where chaos reigns. Kirikiri, where neglect devours hope. Each built for justice. Yet each a reflection of what happens when control turns cruel, when society decides some lives are no longer worth saving. And this is only the beginning. Because the next prisons on this list are not just brutal, they reach places where death is routine and survival itself feels like rebellion. La Sabaneta Prison, Venezuela. Welcome to La Sabaneta Prison, in Maracaibo, Venezuela, a place once described by its own warden as the gates of hell. Built to hold just 700 inmates, it became home to nearly 3,700. Every corridor, every cell, overflowed with bodies and tension. The heat was suffocating, the air thick with sweat and desperation. Guards rarely entered the deeper blocks. They throw food through the gates and lock them again, leaving the prisoners to decide who lived long enough to eat. Inside, chaos ruled. Gangs split the prison into territories. Color-coded walls marked their control. The strong enforced their own laws. The weak simply disappeared. Knives were carved from toothbrushes, machetes from fan blades, and guns were smuggled in piece by piece. The guards called it self-governance. The inmates called it survival. Among them was a man known only as El Macho, the maimed one. He ran his cell block like a king. He had a cabinet of trusted enforcers, a kitchen that served only his men, and his own court where disputes were settled, often with a blade. His power came from fear, and in La Sabaneta, fear was the only currency that mattered. Then came January 3rd, 1994. A dispute over a water pump spiraled into all-out war. Within minutes, gunfire and screams filled the air. Guards locked the outer gates and stood back. From the watchtowers, they watched men kill each other below, machetes flashing under flickering bulbs. Grenades exploded in hallways. Fire consumed the dormitories. By morning, the stench of smoke and death covered the compound. When the chaos ended, 108 inmates were dead. The Venezuelan newspaper El Nacional described it as a field of bodies, blood, and ash, mixed into mud. The next day, graffiti appeared on a wall. "Welcome to the end of the world." Afterward, officials combed through the ruins. They found hidden tunnels beneath the cell blocks, makeshift passageways used to smuggle weapons and contraband. Some said the tunnels had also been used to hide the dead. No proof was ever confirmed, but the rumor itself spoke volumes about the horror that place had become. When La Sabaneta finally closed in 2013, Venezuela's Minister of Justice stood outside and said, "We are not closing a prison. We are closing a nightmare." For thousands of men, it was too late. Hell doesn't shut its gates, it only changes its name. Black Dolphin Prison, Russia. From the chaos of South America, we move to the ice and iron of Russia's Orenburg region, to a place the locals call the Polar Wolf, but the world knows as Black Dolphin Prison. Officially named Penal Colony Number 6, it houses the most dangerous criminals in Russia: serial killers, cannibals, and terrorists. Every inmate here is serving life, with no chance of release. Black Dolphin operates with military precision. Each cell lies behind 3 steel doors. Inside, a metal bunk, a bolted stool, a narrow table, and a small barred window that lets in almost no light. The inmates never see darkness. Lights stay on 24 hours a day. Guards patrol in silence. Cameras capture every movement. Prisoners are checked every 15 minutes, even at night. And when they move through the halls, they are bent double, hands cuffed behind their backs, eyes fixed on the floor. Guards call it the flight of the dolphin. It's a way to control, to humiliate, to erase identity. A former officer once said, "You don't walk among men in Black Dolphin. You walk among ghosts." Every guard is forbidden from speaking casually to inmates. No sympathy, no small talk, no mistakes, because the men locked inside have killed entire families, mutilated victims, and in some cases, eaten them. One of the prisoners reportedly confessed to 48 murders. Another told a reporter that he thought about his crimes every day at dinner. To survive here is not to live. It is to exist inside a system designed to make you forget what life feels like. A warden once told a Russian documentary crew, "The only way out of Black Dolphin is through the chimney." He wasn't exaggerating. Inmates are woken at dawn, forced to stand all day, allowed no rest until night. Meals are ladles of soup, a piece of bread, and silence. They cannot sit or lie down during the day. They cannot speak unless spoken to. Most lose track of time within months. Some eventually stop eating, others stop speaking. A few attempt to end their lives, but even that requires permission. For them, death is the only freedom left. One guard put it simply, "You can't show kindness here. If you do, you'll never make it home." In Black Dolphin, mercy is considered weakness, and weakness can get you killed. That's the rule for both sides of the bars. Tadmor Prison, Syria. From the frozen tundra, we descend into the desert, to one of the most feared and secretive prisons in the Middle East, Tadmor Prison, in Palmyra, Syria. Built in the 1930s under French rule, Tadmor began as a military barracks. Under the Assad family regime, it became a political prison and one of the darkest places on earth. Inmates were packed into narrow cells, beaten daily, and denied food and medical care. Whips, cables, and rifle butts replaced interrogation rooms. No lawyers, no charges, no hope. Then, on June 27, 1980, came the massacre. An assassination attempt had just been made on President Hafez al-Assad. In retaliation, units of the defense brigades stormed Tadmor at dawn. They entered the dormitories and opened fire on unarmed prisoners. Within hours, between 500 and 1,000 men were dead. Their names were never recorded. Their families were never notified. A surviving inmate later recalled, "We didn't count the days in Tadmor. We counted screams." For decades after, reports described routine torture and executions. Prisoners were hung from ceilings, electrocuted, beaten until bones shattered. Walls bore scratch marks from fingernails, the last record of men who would never be found. Tadmor became known as the House of the Dead. When the Syrian civil war erupted, Tadmor changed hands, from government control to ISIS occupation. In 2015, ISIS blew up much of the complex. They claimed it was to destroy a symbol of tyranny, but many believe it was to erase decades of evidence: the bones, the files, the ghosts of what the regime had done. Today, Tadmor is rubble scattered across the desert, but the silence there speaks louder than the gunfire that once filled it. If you've made it this far, you've already stepped too deep into the dark. But if you think you can handle what comes next, the prison where the human mind itself is tested, hit subscribe right now. Bang Kwang Central Prison, Thailand. The air inside Bang Kwang Prison, just outside Bangkok, is thick with heat, fear, and silence. Locals call it the Bangkok Hilton, but there's nothing luxurious about it. Built in the 1930s, Kwang was designed for around 3,500 inmates. Today, more than 8,000 are packed behind its high walls. Many are serving long sentences for drug trafficking or murder. Others wait years for their appeal or execution. Inmates on death row live in constant uncertainty. No one knows when their turn will come. The executions are unannounced, carried out at dawn, without warning. Until 2003, prisoners were executed by firing squad. After that, Thailand switched to lethal injection, but the fear remained the same. Prisoners wake before sunrise to the sound of clanging gates. They eat small portions of rice and soup, sometimes crawling with insects. For decades, men sentenced to death were shackled with iron leg chains, sometimes welded permanently. Former inmates described the scars and the sound of chains dragging across concrete as reminders that time had stopped. One ex-prisoner told the BBC, "Every morning, you wake up wondering, is this the day they call my name?" Foreign nationals, including British, Nigerian, and Australian citizens, have been executed here over the years. Some maintain their innocence until their final breath. The Thai government has since pledged to reform parts of its prison system, but Kwang remains a place where hope rarely survives. Even Thailand's own Department of Corrections once admitted the overcrowding had reached critical humanitarian limits. Kwang isn't just a prison. It's a waiting room between life and death, and for many, the waiting never ends. Camp 22, North Korea. From the tropical humidity of Bangkok, we move north to a place far colder, far darker. A place that officially doesn't exist. Camp 22, also known as the Horyong concentration camp, sits deep in North Korea's North Hamgyong province, near the Chinese border. For decades, it was one of the largest and most secretive political prison camps in the world. According to satellite imagery and defector testimonies, Camp 22 once spanned over 700 square kilometers, large enough to hold a small city. Human rights organizations estimate that 50,000 to 60,000 prisoners were held there, men, women, and children alike. In North Korea, punishment doesn't end with the accused. Under the regime's 3 generations of punishment policy, if one person is convicted of a political crime, their entire family, children, parents, even grandparents, can be imprisoned. That's how whole bloodlines vanish. Inside Camp 22, survival was measured in days. Prisoners worked from dawn until nightfall in freezing mines and fields, often collapsing from hunger. Food rations consisted of a handful of cornmeal and salt soup. Those who tried to escape were executed publicly. A former security officer, Kwang defected in 2002 and gave testimony to the UN and international media. He described what he called chemical experiments on prisoners, gas chambers used to test how long it took people to die. His statements shocked the world, though North Korea denied every allegation. Satellite images later verified many features he described, including the camp's perimeter, housing blocks, and execution grounds. In 2012, new satellite photos showed that much of Camp 22 had been dismantled. North Korea claimed it had been closed, but defectors insist the prisoners were simply moved to other camps deeper in the mountains. One survivor told Amnesty International, "No one leaves Camp 22 alive. You disappear, and the world forgets you." Camp 22 stands as one of modern history's most haunting reminders that a prison doesn't need to exist on a map to destroy lives. Evin Prison, Iran. From the secrecy of North Korea to the heart of Tehran, where another kind of silence reigns. This is Evin Prison. Built in 1972, Evin was first intended for political prisoners under the Shah's rule. After the 1979 revolution, it became the backbone of Iran's state security system, a place where journalists, activists, students, and academics were sent for re-education. Today, it remains one of the world's most infamous prisons for political dissent. Former inmates describe interrogations lasting days, often accompanied by psychological and physical torture. Cells barely large enough to sit in. Solitary confinement under bright lights that never turn off. And a level of surveillance that leaves no moment private. Women detained there have spoken of threats against their families, forced confessions, and humiliation. Men describe beatings, mock executions, and months in isolation with no human contact. Many were never formally charged. In October 2022, a massive fire broke out inside Evin. Gunshots echoed through the night. Flames engulfed several wards. Dozens were killed and hundreds injured. State media blamed riots. But leaked CCTV footage, published by hackers earlier that year, had already shown guards beating inmates with cables and dragging unconscious prisoners across hallways. The images matched decades of survivor testimonies, proof of what many had long alleged. A former political prisoner told Reuters, "Evin doesn't just imprison your body, it imprisons your voice." Even after global outrage, little has changed. Evin continues to hold hundreds of journalists, women's rights activists, and students, people whose only crime was speaking out. The government calls it a correctional facility. For those inside, it's a machine designed to erase individuality, one confession at a time. 3 prisons, 3 faces of fear. Kwang, where prisoners die slowly. Camp 22, where generations disappear. Evin, where truth itself is chained. Different continents, different governments, but one shared message, that when power fears dissent, humanity becomes expendable. Together with the prisons from earlier chapters, ADX Florence, Carandiru, Kirikiri, La Sabaneta, Black Dolphin, and Tadmor, they form a map of human cruelty stretched across the globe, each built to control, each promising justice, each proving how thin the line between justice and vengeance can really be. As one former warden once said, every prison starts as an idea, but once you build it, it starts to build you back. Maybe that's the real punishment. Not the walls, not the chains, but what these places reveal about us, about how easily we trade mercy for order and conscience for control. Because in the end, the most terrifying thing about these prisons isn't who's inside them. It's that we built them at all. 9 prisons, 9 nightmares, 1 truth. Every wall ever raised to contain cruelty has an echo, and sometimes that echo sounds a lot like us. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for what's next. Hit subscribe, because the next one might just change everything you thought you knew about justice, freedom, and fear.